So first of all, thank you for doing this interview with us. I know that a lot of our followers are very, very excited to hear from you today. Sustainability and environmental issues are not a very talked about subject in the Middle East. So we are very excited to hear from an expert. First of all, I understand that you for several years have been analyzing the global energy market, and can you just share some insights into the market? What geographical areas are have most potential?
Thank you for your invitation. Just before starting, I just want to say that I'm not an expert in this region, but for sure what I could say about what happened in the past 20 or 2 decades is that, we have seen that during a previous lecture, that you have these emerging economies that are struggling to find a policy to fight for energy transition because they want to grow economically speaking, and in addition to have these growing needs in terms of demand. And if you want to produce more, if you want to satisfy your demand, you need to produce energy and to use energy. So the main difficulties, the main issue is to decouple your economy. That is to say, to maintain a significant and steady economic growth to satisfy a growing demand because of demographic, and which is the particularity of your region. The fact that you need to satisfy economic growth plus more population by using more efficiently energy. This is the decoupling, and this is what we call the energy efficiency, energy intensity. And what we have seen so far since the, let's say, 1990 is that some regions are doing a lot of efforts, like China, Russia, and the bad guys, the bad clients of energy efficiency are the Middle East. Because when we look at some indicators like the energy intensity, that is an indicator that compares the amount of energy which is used to produce one value of GDP. And when we see that in all regions they have improved the energy intensity, that is to say they were able to reduce the energy used to produce 1 unit of GDP, the Middle East was increasing.
Yeah, that's great. So you can see a potential of moving from oil and gas and more towards renewable energy in the region?
Okay, so indeed, when we talk about energy transition, it cannot be done in a minute. So the word transition has all its mean. And in fact, in this region, I think that gas can play an amazing role in transition to the final goal, which is no fuel anymore in the energy. But you cannot change structural change very quickly within a particular region which rely a lot on oil, and which is the case of the Middle East. So indeed, I think that gas can play this transition role, having in mind that some countries where this energy is exported, you see that, for instance, in European Union, you will have within the next decade higher demand in gas, and then it will decrease in trend. So Middle East has also to be prepared about this substitution. Oil, coal to oil, oil to gas, gas to renewables.
Yeah, definitely. And seeing the politics in the Middle East, we can see that there's a lot of instability in general. Do you think that this instability in the geopolitical issues, do you think that they can affect the move towards sustainability in the Middle East?
I don't know, but for sure they are affecting your. I guess you're coming from that area.
Yes.
That it's affecting your economy, because if we took, for example, what happened with the introduction of shale gas in the USA, it had a direct impact on what? On oil prices. And when you see that your economies are highly depending on oil revenues, then it's affecting and drastically your economy, because the oil pricing are going down, and then you're exporting less, your economy is heavily affected. And if you take into account as well all the long-term path roads that are currently implemented in the European Union, where they want to get off these fossil fuels, it means that they will find alternatives that are not coming from anymore your area, for instance.
Definitely. And you mentioned the European Union, and do you see that the US and EU policies can affect the Middle Eastern policies in terms of environment, energy, and sustainability?
I think in a good and a bad manner, because in a bad, as I said, in EU they are trying to find other way of using energy and non-fossil fuel. So it means that the EU is trying to improve its trade balance and basically to reduce significantly its import in energy. So it will have a bad impact. But it will offer you as well a great opportunity to think differently. And I think I'm not really specialized in that, but I guess that there is a lot of cooperation and policy implementations that are trying to take example or to see how can best practices implemented in the EU, could be implemented in some other areas like Middle East, North African countries, and so on.
Yeah. And in your opinion, do you think that it's at all possible to give up oil and move to renewable energy instead in the Middle East and in the world in general?
Yeah, we have to. We have to, but it's a long process, again, with some steps, as I said, and we have no choice if we want to decrease CO2 emission, which is the main after methane, CH4. This is the principal gases that are affecting global temperature, and the CO2 comes from the burn of fossil fuels like coal and oil. So we have to take advantage of that and find new way of consuming, and it can be on two sides. On the supply side, that, as you said, it's really important to find new way of supplying energy in a very neutral, carbon neutral manner with renewable energies. So that's a way. And making more complementarities between energies, because you cannot bet only on one kind of energy. So it's a mix of renewable energies. And at the same time, so that on one side you have to adapt as your supply, and of course we have to change our way of consuming, so on demand. And this can be done through more virtuous behaviors, but as well with the spread of more efficient technologies. Like in your countries, one of the main problem of the building consumption can be AC. So we have first of all to change the behaviors, like you should not cold your building at 18 or 17 degrees, but 2021 is okay, so you can save a large amount of energy and thus of money. And as well, you could implement more efficient technology to improve the performance of the building, which is energy efficiency.
Mm-hmm. Very exciting. And I'm just going to move towards your article, because you wrote an article about energy dependence in French households and how they can be a source of inequality. Can you just tell us more about this article? It was very interesting.
This article was written in line with the Yellow Vest protests, because as you know, the starting point of the Yellow protest was done because of this increase of carbon tax. So then I was curious to know more about these inequalities, and I looked for some data, evidences that say that the household effort to spend the annual expenses on energy in France is roughly on average 8% of the budget of a household is dedicated to its energy expenses, like as I said, expenses for the dwelling, including space and water heating, plus the electricity used for electrical appliances, and the energy that is used for transportation. And when you look more precisely between the different deciles of the population, you see huge differences, and 10% of the lowest population is paying much more than 12% of annual expenses. And so you have this first discrimination, and the second discrimination is whenever you live close or far away from a urban area, from this existing infrastructure, and you could afford to take the cars, and it means that in this rural area you are obliged to use your car, and thus your expenses in energy are much more higher. And if we could make a parallel about these inequalities and the ongoing policies in the Middle East, I think I would like to highlight the way these governments are or were subsidizing energy. I know that a lot of countries, they are trying to decrease this level of subsidies because of course it's it causes a high debt to these governments, but this is not the main drawback. I think the main drawback of this energy fuel subsidy is the fact that in the end you're giving money to the richest people that are taking that can buy a car, use their car, while the others, they are not taking advantage of the subsidies. So it's in terms of inequality, it has this double effect, negative effect.
Definitely. Thank you so much. Do you have any last comments for us about this particular topic?
I think what's happening now, it's an amazing opportunity for us to think differently, to act differently. And in the region where you are living or where you intend maybe to come back, the main potential lives in transportation, of course, and in buildings.
Yeah.
And today, if we think your region, Middle East, but as well China, there is not really building codes or regulations saying that a building should have this kind of performance to avoid this waste of energy, because as soon as a building is erected, then you cannot change it. So that's why the highest potential is not really in the EU, because the existing stock is here and we have to do with what we have, which is difficult. But the main potential is in your growing economies, where you will have a massive amount of new buildings, and we have to make it compliant and to monitor what's erected and how it will be built to save energy.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you.